Welcome back to the all-time best. So my last video for the day, in all likelihood, New York Islanders. Now I'm saying that although there is a live stream we're going to be doing on the Entertainment Guy for looks like Death Truck / GTA 5. So there's that. Now the New York Islanders, interesting history in that at the time I started watching hockey, they were the best team. Period. They were in the midst of their 4 straight Stanley Cup wins. They won in 1980, 81, 82, and 83. And in 84, they got to the Stanley Cup Finals. So they won 19 straight series, and nobody's ever going to do that again. Denny Potvin said, yeah, no, nobody's ever going to do that again. And normally when somebody goes, yeah, nobody's ever going to do what I did again, you're looking at you, that's kind of egotistical, but the Islanders are right. Nobody's ever going to win 19 straight series again. So that's a pretty solid record overall. And so it's not a surprise that a lot of the all-time greatest from that team are players who were parts of that Stanley Cup. Trottier, all-time points leader at 1,353. Is he the all-time greatest New York Islander? You can make that argument. Mike Bossy, 573 goals. Is he their all-time greatest goal scorer? Well, yes. There hasn't been a goal scorer like Bossy. It just doesn't happen. You can argue Bossy's the greatest goal scorer in NHL history. That, his back just gave out. If not, he likely ends up with 900 plus NHL goals. I have no doubt in my mind, having watched him, he would have ended up with about 900 NHL goals by the time his career's over, had it not been for injuries shortening it, his back. The assists, Trottier, 853. So Trottier overall pretty good numbers, and he goes to Pittsburgh, wins another couple of Stanley Cups, so he has a lot of Stanley Cup rings. Penalty minutes, Mick Vukota with 1,879. He could throw knuckles, or Chuck Knuckles, throw fists. He was good at that. And they had a lot of truculence on that team, as Brian Burke would call it, in the 90s. And Darius Kasparaitis comes to mind, although he's not on the board, because I wouldn't put him in the same category as these guys. But yeah, Kasparaitis was he was a Marchand of his time. Power play goals, Mike Bossy with 180. So again, the overall numbers for the New York Islanders from the 80s are fantastic, and it is hard to argue against that being the best. Potvin, not on any of these lists, but Denny Potvin, the best defenseman this team has ever had. I don't know if it's close. I really don't. John Tavares, I know how Tavares left. You know what? He's still one of the most talented players the Islanders have ever had. It stinks the way that he left. I understand why Islander fans are mad about it, but he still belongs on the board. Clark Gillies, power forward before that was a term at all in the NHL. He was fantastic at the scoring side of things, and everybody was scared of Clark Gillies. John Tonelli, part of that dynasty, and again, when it came to toughness, the Islanders had that in spades. So they had all the talent to score goals. They had a great goaltender. Oh, and you want to fight? The Islanders were willing to take that up as well. Brent Sutter goes on the list. Dwayne Sutter's not on the list as one of the all-time greats, but they were together on that team, and eventually Ron Sutter played there as well. So if your name was Sutter, they were interested in your services. Bob Nystrom as well. Nystrom, one of the best all-around players. Wayne Merrick's not on the list of all-time greats, but again, when you get into, and you can get into Stefan Persson, there are a lot of players who won multiple Stanley Cups that you can make the argument, you know what, this was a great team. And so for the New York Islanders, it was a tremendous time in the early 80s. Wins, Billy Smith's the all-time wins leader with 304. Save percentage, Thomas Greiss has the best save percentage with a 915. Shots against, Billy Smith faced 19,083 shots in the regular season as a goaltender for the Islanders. All-time shutouts leader, Glenn Resch. Yes, Chico Resch with 25. So that might be a little bit of a surprise that Chico Resch is their all-time leader in shutouts. But when it comes to goaltenders, Billy Smith is the best. It's for me, I don't know that it's necessarily close. Rick DiPietro at times looked like he might get into that conversation. He belongs on the board. He did win some games. Then he signed that obscene contract, which you can't blame him for signing it. You can blame them for offering it to him. But he took that contract, and then it all kind of fell apart for him not long after. Kelly Rudy, very good young goaltender for the New York Islanders that they moved out to L.A. And then they ended up with Healy and Fitzpatrick for a while there. It looked like it was going to be a good young tandem. Rolly Melanson starts his career as a New York Islander as well, and at times it looked like he might have stolen Billy Smith's job, but of course Smith would take it back. That 83 season, but yeah, I mean things were pretty darn good for them in net for a long time. Now their best team, I went with the 82-83 team. Why? That was their fourth Stanley Cup, and in many respects that was their most impressive. Halfway through the year, they kind of looked like they weren't the Islanders anymore, and there were magazines. I still have a magazine on Is This the End of Dynasties? Talking about how the Islanders didn't look like they were going to win their fourth in a row, and was there really a team that was going to be a dynasty? I mean, these Oilers look good, but can they really win a Stanley Cup? Yeah, they won a couple. And yeah, that 83 team for me is their all-time best. And again, it basically has all of their big-name players, and it was a really fantastic win for them over the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals. And then in 84, they lost the Stanley Cup Finals. And then after that, just they were exhausted, is my thought. Most wins versus any team, that would be the New Jersey Devils. That would include Kansas City and the Colorado Rockies as well, 136. Points percentage against Winnipeg and the former Atlanta Thrashers. They have a winning percentage of .615. Goals for, no surprise, it's the New York Rangers. 884 goals against the New York Rangers. Goals for per game, very, very close. So I included both up here. Against Winnipeg, which includes the former Atlanta Thrashers, 3.58. Versus Dallas, which would include the Minnesota North Stars, one of the teams they defeated in a Stanley Cup final to get that dynasty 4 in a row. Dallas, 3.57. So very, very close between Dallas and Winnipeg. Goals against per game, Vegas, 2.33. They only score 2.5 per game against Vegas. They've only played Vegas 6 times. They've won 3, they've lost 3. But they know how to keep Vegas off the board. Again, if you're in the West and you have trouble keeping Vegas on the board, call almost any team in the East, it would seem. They've got Vegas figured out. But also, because it's such a small sample size against Vegas, San Jose, they allow 2.72 goals per game against the San Jose Sharks. So again, teams from the 90s expansion and beyond are the ones that we're seeing most often as goals against per game, which makes total sense. Most points, 81-82. They had 118. So if you want to make the argument that was their best team, sure. The difference between the 82 roster and the 83 roster, minimal. Really, again, I put the 82-83 because that was their 4th straight Stanley Cup. That's very impressive. You can win 4 in a row. Consecutive playoff appearances, no surprise that it includes the Dynasty. From 1975 through 1988. It's 14 seasons. And by the time 1980 rolled around, there was some discussion about whether or not the Islanders would win a Stanley Cup. And maybe they didn't quite have what it took to win in the playoffs either. So it's not unusual to see people second-guessing teams until that championship gets won, and then those people are kind of silenced. Best coach, it has to be Al Arbour. Al Arbour. 110% the best coach. And no offense to Barry Trotz. He does a good job. He's not Al Arbour. 4 straight Stanley Cup wins. And Bill Torrey is GM because he was the general manager when they were winning those Stanley Cups. So excellent overall record for the New York Islanders. Their management team, everything was great from top to bottom. And the scary thing was, as their dynasty was coming to an end, Pat LaFontaine was coming in, Pat Flatley was coming in, and I thought, oh wow, they could keep it going. But of course, things did fall apart after that. A lot of their dynasty suddenly got old. Going through all those Stanley Cup playoffs will do that to a person. 20 series in 5 years. That's basically a whole season of hockey on top of all the seasons you're playing. And almost no off season. Notable captains. I went with Tavares. Notable, again. I know they have Anders Lee right now, but Tavares was captain. Alexei Yashin was captain of this team. Mike Pekka, Trevor Linden, notable captain. There may be some watching going, why isn't he under the... He was an Islander list. Well, because I've got him under the notable captains list. Flatley, as mentioned. Potvin and Ed Westfall was their first ever captain, and he was captain for, I think, the first 5 years, what I was reading. So yeah, they've had some notable captains along the way. Pretty impressive list overall. And Denny Potvin was their captain during their dynasty years. And yeah, when I hear comparisons of current players like Dahlin, before he's drafted by Buffalo, people are like, Dahlin compares to Potvin. I was like, holy crap. Now, Potvin could do everything. So the offense was there, the defense was there, and there's a little bit of toughness as well. So if Dahlin ever ends up actually being mentioned in the same sentence towards the end of his career as Potvin, you know you've got a Hall of Famer in your hands. Now, in the he was an Islander category, Richard Brodeur played 2 games before the New York Islanders traded him to Vancouver. And Vancouver, of course, went on a run, and Brodeur would face the Islanders in the Stanley Cup final. Kirk Muller was a New York Islander. Craig Janney. I had forgotten Craig Janney had played for the Islanders, so I throw Craig Janney on the board. I'm like, Craig Janney. Cliff Ronning, yeah, it's one of those teams he played with. He was there for 40 games. Ronning's showing up on the board a lot because it's easy to forget that he played for that team. Wendell Clark up there as well. Wendell bounced around a little bit before he went back to Toronto, and he never should have left Toronto in all reality, and Don Cherry would back me up on that one. Bill Guerin was an Islander for a couple years there, and Doug Weight played around 100 games for the New York Islanders as well. So it's a shorter list than I've had for other teams because the Islanders were remarkably stable throughout the 80s. There wasn't a whole lot of movement. There wasn't any need for movement between 1980 and 1983, other than, of course, Butch Goring. Goring's not on the board as one of the all-time greats, but, of course, the Butch Goring trade in 1980 was seen as one of the things that put them over the top and made them a Stanley Cup champion, and that is why that's where the trade deadline suddenly got a lot more public scrutiny, and it was recognized for being very, very important, and it started with the Butch Goring deal. So he's not on the board, but I've mentioned him here, so I have mentioned him in the video. And, of course, they retired Goring's number this year. So there you go. The all-time best of the New York Islanders. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And I guess one question I have is, will we look back 10 years from now, if I did this 10 years from now, and will there be players from the current team? Does Barzal get into this conversation at some point? Or did the 80s Islanders cast this shadow so wide that it's highly unlikely that any Islanders franchise from here, any given generation of players, could ever live up to that? Or could it happen? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and I don't mean having 4 straight Stanley Cups, because that's crazy talk. I don't think that ever happens again. But I'm talking like a couple of Stanley Cups and some feeling of the Islanders being back to what made this great, and a lot less of what, the fishermen, remember? Yeah, that kind of thing. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Don't forget to stay home and stay safe as much as humanly possible right now. And hey, I will talk to you again soon.